February 25th, 2026, the CEO of an artificial intelligence company walked into the Pentagon for a meeting with the Secretary of Defense. 6 senior officials were waiting. They told him his company's AI was great, the best, really impressive. Then they gave him 72 hours to hand it over. No restrictions, no guardrails, no ethical limits, or they'd destroy his business. He said no. His company, Anthropic, the makers of Claude, had 2 red lines. Don't use our AI for mass surveillance of American citizens, and don't use it to build weapons that kill without a human pulling the trigger. That's it. Those were the lines. The Pentagon called that woke. 2 days later, the United States government labeled Anthropic a supply chain risk, a classification reserved for foreign adversaries like Huawei. Never before used against an American company. A $200 million contract, gone. Every military contractor ordered to cut ties with them for saying no to surveillance and killer robots. But here's what makes this story insane. Hours after the blacklisting, OpenAI swooped in and took the contract. Their CEO later admitted the whole thing was, his words, quote, opportunistic and sloppy. And then, OpenAI quietly added almost the exact same guardrails that Anthropic was punished for demanding. The Pentagon accepted them. This is what's actually happening behind the AI headlines, and nobody's explaining it. Follow Professor Glitch. We break down the real story every week. To understand how we got here, you need to know who Dario Amodei is. He's the CEO of Anthropic, the company that built Claude. Before that, he was VP of Research at OpenAI. He left in 2021 because he thought OpenAI wasn't taking safety seriously enough. He built Anthropic specifically to be the company that would. And Anthropic wasn't anti-military. That's the part that gets lost in the noise. They were the first frontier AI company to deploy on the Pentagon's classified networks, the first to work with the national laboratories. They helped shut down Chinese cyber attacks. They built a substantial public sector team. Amodei wanted to arm democracies with AI. He just had 2 lines he wouldn't cross. In July 2025, the Pentagon awarded Anthropic a 2-year prototype contract worth up to $200 million. OpenAI, Google, and xAI got similar deals. Everything was fine. Then January 2026 happened. Pete Hegseth became Secretary of Defense, and the rules changed overnight. Hegseth issued an AI strategy memo that mandated all Pentagon AI contracts include, quote, any lawful use language within 180 days. His exact words, quote, the risks of not moving fast enough outweigh the risks of imperfect alignment. Translation, speed matters more than safety. And then he gave a speech at SpaceX, quote, Department of War AI will not be woke. It will work for us. We're building war-ready weapons and systems, not chatbots for an Ivy League faculty lounge. Gone are the days of equitable AI and other DEI and social justice infusions that constrain and confuse our employment of this technology. That's the Secretary of Defense, talking about AI safety like it's a college seminar. So on February 25th, Hegseth summoned Amodei to the Pentagon. 6 senior officials in the room, the Deputy Secretary, the Undersecretary for R&D, the General Counsel, the full varsity squad. Hegseth praised Claude, said it was great. Then he laid down the ultimatum: accept any lawful use with no restrictions or face the consequences. Deadline, 5:01 p.m., Friday, February 27th. 3 specific threats. 1, they designate Anthropic a supply chain risk, a label used for Huawei, never for an American company. 2, they'd invoke the Defense Production Act, a Cold War-era law, to force compliance. 3, they'd terminate the $200 million contract and bar every military contractor from doing business with Anthropic. Amodei pointed out the contradiction. One threat labels us a security risk. The other labels Claude as essential to national security. You can't have both. On Thursday, February 26th, Amodei published his response. He didn't flinch. Quote, we believe deeply in the existential importance of using AI to defend the United States and other democracies, and to defeat our autocratic adversaries. He listed everything Anthropic had done for the military, first on classified networks, first at the national labs, and then the line that changed everything. Quote, these threats do not change our position. We cannot in good conscience accede to their request. 9 words. That's what it cost him $200 million to say. We cannot in good conscience accede to their request. The Pentagon's response was immediate. Emil Michael, the Undersecretary for Research and Engineering, a former Uber executive, took to X. He called Amodei, quote, a liar with a God complex who wants nothing more than to try to personally control the US military. 6 posts in 2 hours. Hegseth reposted every one of them. Michael posted, quote, Anthropic is lying. The Department of War doesn't do mass surveillance as that is already illegal. What we are talking about is allowing our warfighters to use AI without having to call Dario Amodei for permission to shoot down enemy drone swarms that would kill Americans. Hashtag call Dario. That was the Pentagon's official response. A hashtag. Friday, February 27th, 5:03 p.m., 2 minutes past the deadline, Hegseth announced the supply chain risk designation. Quote, effective immediately, no contractor, supplier, or partner that does business with the United States military may conduct any commercial activity with Anthropic. Minutes later, Trump posted on Truth Social, ordering all federal agencies to immediately cease all use of Anthropic's technology. Trump called Anthropic's leadership, quote, radical leftists who had no idea about the real world. The White House said the president would, quote, never allow a radical left, woke company to jeopardize our national security by dictating how the greatest and most powerful military in the world operates. That's how they described a company that asked for 2 guardrails. Hours after the blacklisting, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman announced that OpenAI had reached an agreement with the Pentagon for deployment on classified networks. The timing was not subtle. Anthropic gets blacklisted at 5:03 p.m. OpenAI announces by that evening. The contract Anthropic lost for demanding guardrails was now OpenAI's. But here's the thing Altman said earlier that same week. Quote, for all the differences I have with Anthropic, I mostly trust them as a company, and I think they really do care about safety. He publicly supported their red lines. Then he took their contract. Then he admitted it looked, his words, quote, opportunistic and sloppy. On March 3rd, Altman posted an internal memo on X. OpenAI was amending the Pentagon deal. The new language, quote, the AI system shall not be intentionally used for domestic surveillance of US persons and nationals. Sound familiar? That's Anthropic's red line. The one they got blacklisted for. OpenAI just got the Pentagon to agree to it, in writing. Amodei saw it. In a memo to Anthropic employees, he called OpenAI's messaging around the deal, quote, safety theater, and quote, just straight up lies. The man who built the safety-first AI company watched his competitor take his contract, add his guardrails back, and get praised for it. But the public wasn't buying it either. ChatGPT uninstalls surged 295% on February 28th. 1-star reviews jumped 775%. 5-star reviews dropped 50%. People were deleting ChatGPT and downloading Claude instead. Claude became the #1 free app on the US App Store for the first time in its history. Activists gathered outside OpenAI's headquarters in San Francisco. The Quit GPT movement went viral. On Reddit, post after post urged people to cancel ChatGPT. Anthropic introduced a feature letting you import your entire ChatGPT history into Claude. More than 1 million people were signing up for Claude every single day. Inside OpenAI, people were furious. Nearly 900 current and former employees from OpenAI and Google signed an open letter supporting Anthropic. Quote, we hope our leaders will put aside their differences and stand together to refuse the Department of War's demands for permission to use our models for domestic mass surveillance and autonomously killing people without human oversight. Their own employees said the quiet part out loud. Then Caitlin Kalinowski quit. She was OpenAI's head of robotics, hired from Meta 4 months earlier to lead their hardware division. On March 7th, she posted her resignation. Quote, this wasn't an easy call. AI has an important role in national security, but surveillance of Americans without judicial oversight and lethal autonomy, without human authorization, are lines that deserve more deliberation than they got. She clarified later, quote, my issue is that the announcement was rushed without the guardrails defined. It's a governance concern first and foremost. These are too important for deals or announcements to be rushed. The person building OpenAI's physical AI future walked out because the Pentagon deal was decided in 3 days with no real deliberation. And at an all-hands meeting on March 5th, Altman told OpenAI employees something remarkable. Quote, "So maybe you think the Iran strike was good and the Venezuela invasion was bad. You don't get to weigh in on that." The CEO of the company building the world's most powerful AI told his employees they don't get to have an opinion on how it's used to kill people. So let's step back and see what actually happened here. The Pentagon created what amounts to a compliance auction. Blacklist the company that says no. Reward the company that says yes. Let the yes company quietly add the same protections back later. The message to every AI company in America is crystal clear. Comply first, negotiate later. Resistance gets you treated like Huawei. Think about what the Pentagon actually argued. They said mass surveillance of Americans is already illegal. They said they have no interest in autonomous weapons without human oversight. They said Anthropic's guardrails were unnecessary. And then they blacklisted Anthropic for insisting on those unnecessary guardrails. If the restrictions don't matter, why would you destroy a company for asking for them? Senator Alyssa Slotkin asked the obvious question on X. Quote, "Why wouldn't Secretary Hegseth say, 'No problem, we're never going to use AI at the Pentagon to conduct mass surveillance of American citizens'?" The answer is because this was never about surveillance or autonomous weapons. It was about establishing a precedent. No AI company gets to have conditions. You take the contract on our terms, or you don't take it at all. The Electronic Frontier Foundation nailed the deeper problem. Privacy protections are being determined through private contract negotiations instead of legislation. Whether your AI can be used to spy on you depends entirely on whether one CEO has the spine to lose $200 million by saying no. And what happens to the next CEO who sees what happened to Dario Amodei? Former Trump AI advisor Dean Ball, the man who helped write Trump's AI action plan, called the Pentagon's approach, quote, "a whole different level of insane." He said, "You're telling everyone else who supplies to the DoD you cannot use Anthropic's models, while also saying the DoD must use Anthropic's models." Even the people who built this administration's AI policy thought it went too far. Retired Air Force Lieutenant General Jack Shanahan, who previously directed the Pentagon's own AI efforts, posted that Anthropic was, quote, "not trying to play cute here," and was committed to helping the government. He called both of Anthropic's red lines reasonable. Quote, "Mass surveillance of US citizens? No thanks. Seems like a reasonable second red line." This isn't some tech bro opinion. This is the man who ran Pentagon AI. Remember Google in 2018? 4,000 employees protested Project Maven, the Pentagon's AI drone targeting program. Dozens resigned. Google canceled the military contract entirely. Back then, the government didn't blacklist Google, didn't call them a supply chain risk, didn't invoke the Defense Production Act. What changed between 2018 and 2026 is the question you should be asking. On March 9th, Anthropic filed lawsuits in 2 federal courts. The arguments are constitutional. First Amendment retaliation for protected speech, Fifth Amendment due process violations. Anthropic is arguing that the supply chain risk designation was punishment for saying no, not a legitimate security determination. And the legal question at the center of it is genuinely unprecedented. Can a company express ethical values through the design of its products? Can the government use procurement power to punish that expression? And what happens when the most powerful technology ever created is being built by private companies while the government demands unconditional access? There is no case law for this. The courts have never decided whether AI safety guardrails count as protected speech. Meanwhile, xAI, Elon Musk's company, accepted the Pentagon's terms without a single restriction. No guardrails, no negotiation, just yes. This is the same Grok AI that had to be restricted after generating sexualized deepfakes of real people. That's the company the Pentagon chose as its preferred vendor. Let that sit. Here's what you need to take from this. Number 1, the Pentagon accepted from OpenAI the same protections it blacklisted Anthropic for demanding. The issue was never the guardrails. It was about establishing that no company gets to say no. If that doesn't concern you, think about who's building the AI that has access to your data, your movements, your life. Number 2, Your privacy protections on AI right now depend entirely on whether a CEO has the courage to lose $200 million by saying no. That is not a system. That is one person standing between you and a government that wants unconditional access to the most powerful surveillance technology ever built. Congress hasn't passed a single law governing military AI. Not one. Number 3, watch what companies do, not what they say. Altman said he supported Anthropic's red lines. Then he took the contract. He said the deal looked opportunistic and sloppy. Then he told his employees they don't get to have opinions about how the military uses their work. The words and the actions are pointing in opposite directions. Pay attention to the actions. Amodei said something in his CBS interview that I keep coming back to. Quote, "I don't think the right long-term solution is for a private company and the Pentagon to argue about this. I think Congress needs to act." He's right. One CEO's conscience is not a governance model. But until Congress does its job, the only thing standing between AI and unrestricted military power is whether the person at the top of the company is willing to lose everything for saying no. Dario Amodei was. The question is, will the next one be?